Today, I want to talk about kind of a general principle that I found useful in projects, and then we'll look at some specific examples of it. So, the general principle is basically don't ignore pain in your projects. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's take one specific example: how long it takes our CI pipeline to run. Now, when your project first starts out, maybe it takes a minute or 2 minutes, and you're not even noticing at all. It's running all the tests. It's doing your code style checks. It's doing all of these things for you, and it's running really quick. But then over time, the project grows, you add additional tools, and it slows down little by little, piece by piece. So maybe that 1 minute becomes 2 minutes, becomes 3, becomes 5, becomes 10. And this happens over the course of multiple years. So there's never one point where it doubles in time and everybody feels the pain on the team. It's just kind of slowly creeping up and up and up. And eventually it is painful, but you've kind of gotten used to it along the way. So first, look for those things in your project and try to fix them. And so I'm going to show some specific things with CI that can help. Now, I have opened a CI project, the pipeline for mastering Laravel.io, our Laravel education site. And I'm going to point out a couple things that I've done to make this faster. This one runs pretty quick because it's mainly a content-driven site. There's not a whole lot of application logic going on. But these things will apply probably to other projects too. So the first thing is I use Docker. I use it for local development. I use it in CI, and we use it in production. And one thing that I like to do is I like to have my local environment and production match, and then CI match as well. And so it just gives me a little bit more confidence that when my tests run and it says they pass, that it's passing any production-like environment. It just gives me a little bit of extra confidence. But we are not running dusk tests. For example, we're just using Laravel's feature and unit tests, which doesn't involve a web server. It doesn't involve a browser. It doesn't involve any of those things. It's just booting the Laravel framework directly in PHP and making assertions about how the application runs. So you'll notice on this line, I'm only, in my Docker compose file, I have a web container, which is our Nginx web server. And then I have an app container, which is the PHP FPM runtime. But I'm only starting the app container because I don't use the web container in CI. So you could argue, well, it's not exactly the same, but it's not being used, so it doesn't really matter. That's a minor detail, but it can shave some time off the CI pipeline. The other thing I noticed, and it's not present here anymore because I've already fixed it, but as part of our Nginx Docker container, we would build a certificate, and we would build one that was trusted. And so that takes some time, right? It has to generate keys and do all this different stuff to generate files on disk. And in CI, we were doing that, and it took 30, 35, 40 seconds. And then I noticed, well, I'm not even running the Nginx container anymore. Nothing's using these certificates. So again, another step, just delete it. It just makes it a little faster. Those are some pretty easy wins. But you probably have something like that in your CI pipeline that if you thought about it, if you took a step back, you don't really need to run that in CI. Now let's look at something a little more tricky, a little more technical, but can also have a big impact. That is caching. So for example, you can see here, I'm caching my Composer dependencies. So what this means is when I run Composer install, Composer itself has a cache. That's not exactly what we're talking about here. I'm actually caching what Composer installs into my vendor folder. So if nothing has changed in my Composer lock file, that's what I'm looking at to determine if the cache is valid or not. If nothing has changed, I can just restore that vendor folder. And now when I hit Composer install, it'll just be like, yep, you have everything you need. So maybe, again, depending on the size of your project, it might take 30, 45, 60 seconds to download all the packages and then to install them. With this cache in place, now it might take 1 or 2 seconds to just validate, yes, what you have in your vendor folder matches your lock file, no more work to be done. The same thing is true for NPM. You can see that down here. In this case, I'm just looking at the package lock.json file, and I'm backing up or caching that node modules folder. But there are some other things that will speed up with caching that are a little trickier to cache. So the two that I'm thinking of that I have in this particular CI pipeline is my code standards checker. I use PHP CS Fixer and Laristan, which is really just kind of a layer on top of PHP Stan. Now, both of these tools, they don't install things, right? What they do is they check your code. They check to see if it's following all the rules you set up for your project. It's doing some static analysis. So these tools, I can't point it. There's no vendor folder to point it at. But what I can point it at is the cache file that the tool uses. It uses it internally. And so you think about it. Let's say your project has 1,000 files and you change one file. Well, when your style fixer runs, it doesn't have to check all 1,000 files. It only needs to check the one file you changed. And so these tools have smarts built into them that it will use that cache to make each run faster. So how do we use this in CI? It's a little tricky, but I'm going to walk you through it. So the first thing is we do set a key, just like we set a key up here. But because there's no one file to look at, and I'm not going to hash my whole project, maybe you could do that. I've never tried that, but that seems like a bad idea. All I want to have happen is I just want a unique key. So every time CI runs, it's basically going to save the newest version of that cache. So in GitHub, I get this run ID variable, which changes on every run of the CI pipeline. And so what that alone will do is when CI runs, it's going to have a new run ID that will never have existed before. So the cache will not load anything. I'm going to start fresh. But then at the end of my run, it's going to save that cache. So that's kind of part one of two. How do we then get it on the next run to load the cache from the previous run? Well, we can use this restore keys property, and you can give it multiple other keys to fall back to, right? So if this specific key does not match, and we know it never will because it's always changing, then it will fall back and it will look at one or more other keys. And the interesting thing here is it doesn't even look for a precise, full, complete match. It even just looks for a partial starts with match. So I can say, hey, fall back when you're trying to restore it, fall back to anything starting with this prefix, and it will grab the newest version of the cache that matches that. So now I've got, with those two pieces in place, when my CI runs, it doesn't match exactly, but it falls back to the one, whatever the previous run was. So I'm kind of there. Maybe 99% of my files are the same. This tool will now run quickly, but then when it finishes, it will always write a new version of that. So it's not getting further and further out of date. It's going to match up to at least whatever the last run was for this particular pipeline. And that same exact approach works with PHP Stan and likely works with other static analysis and CI style type tools that you might want to use. So just the takeaway, first of all, be alert to pain. Don't just live with it. Try to make it even a little bit better and get things going better for your team. And then specifically in CI, if your pipeline's getting slow, I shared some tips that will hopefully make it a little bit quicker in your project.